And welcome to Bronze and Modern Gods. We got John here along with my buddy Rich. What's going on, Rich? How you doing?
Tired. we had a really productive Friday.
And, in case you guys didn't know it or you missed it, we had our first live sale on Instagram on Friday night, and it was, I think, a huge success. I think we had a lot of fun. I think people had a lot of fun. If you're not following us on Instagram or Facebook, it's at Bronze and Modern Gods. You see it rolling down on the scroll below us right now. What did you think? How did you have fun?
Oh, I had a blast. It was a great time. Everybody seemed to be into it. We were moving books and we were talking about books and just having a good time. It was fun.
And I had, I think, one too many amaretto sours. I look back and I'm beat red, even redder than I am usually. So I hope I didn't sell anything for like half GPA.
I think people got good deals. And again, we had conversations about the books. You know, it wasn't just slinging them. It was actually talking about them and why they were, we thought, good buys.
So let's do it again sometime. How about tomorrow? Just kidding.
It takes a lot of work. You know, if people don't know, it takes a lot of work in the background to make those things go smoothly. This is our first attempt at it, so we had some learning curve involved in it, but nothing that was insurmountable, and people were patient, and I really, really appreciate that. And people tuned in to listen, and I appreciate that too.
We had a lot of people there. We really, even if you just came and hang out, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Today, we've got something really cool happening. Not only do we have our Hot Copper Book of the Week. Oh, what's up, 90s? We also have our Underrated Books of the Week, an Artist Spotlight on George Pérez. And we have a guest coming in later today, Jamie Newbold, who I've known for, gosh, 20 years now. He's the owner of Southern California Comics in San Diego, a really cool shop, but he's also an author. He's written a couple of books, and the one we're going to talk to him about today is called The Forensic Comicologist. And it's a lofty title, but when you hear his background and what he used to do before he got into comic books and what he's doing now, you'll really be intrigued. It's a really good thing, so stick around for Jamie later in the show. But first, the nerd shirts. Let's see it. What you got this week?
I am wearing my Twitch shirt. I don't even remember where I got it from Twitch, obviously, or the context, but it's in my collection.
Someday we're gonna have to start streaming on Twitch. That's where all of them kids are with their video games and their Atari 5200.
Yeah, I used to be fascinated by Twitch. I used to spend hours watching people play games.
Well, no comment. My shirt this week is inspired by yours last week when you wore your Cats on Unicorn shirt. I said the only thing missing were laser beams coming from the kitty cat's eyes. So I have
perfect
kitties with laser beams coming from their eyes while flying in space.
That's so apropos.
Laser cats. That is a nerd shirt for sure. Let's get into it. Hot Copper Book of the Week. This is one that, I told you about, and you were kind of like, what? Why are we talking about this? Well, it's Spider-Man Unlimited #1. This is the 1993 version of Spider-Man Unlimited, not the one based on the Fox cartoon of the same name. This was yet another Spider-Man book that they launched that was quarterly, and it was double-sized. And it was also part 1 of the Maximum Carnage crossover. Well, that's probably why you can see a lot of activity around this book, because you've got Carnage, you've got Venom, you've got Spider-Man. It's a #1. I'm here to tell you, even though it's #8 on Go Collect's Hot Modern Books, and I see a lot of activity on live sales, people buying this book, please don't spend a lot for this book. Here's why. I had a comic shop in 1993 when Spider-Man Unlimited #1 came out. If we ask Jamie about it later today, he'll probably say the same thing. This book is, you can wade in it. It's like knee deep. There are so many copies of this book out there. It is not a scarce book. I understand a lot of you guys were born in the 90s. A lot of you guys came up in the 90s, and you see this book and you're like, oh, this is cool. Be patient. Go to conventions when everything gets back to normal, knock on wood. Go through the dollar boxes. Go through the $3 boxes. Please, even though it's selling for about 80 bucks as a slab 9.8, don't spend that. I'm begging you. It's a hot book-ish. It's hot characters. it is not scarce. That's all I'm saying.
So you're seeing a lot of activity on the live sales on Instagram?
Yeah, and I don't begrudge anybody selling the book. You know, if you put a price on it and somebody wants it, that's obviously what the market is bearing for it. I'm just saying, shop around a bit. You know, don't get caught in that live sale frothing at the mouth. Oh my God, I got to claim this before somebody else does. You're going to get plenty of chances to find yourself a Spider-Man Unlimited #1. That's it. The moral of the story.
This book falls into that gap between when I stopped collecting and I went on and did, you know, things that adults do, like get married and have kids and, you know, have a career, and then reestablishing my interest in comics and coming back on board. So it's kind of like just dead zone for me. So if it's not a key that applies to my general interest, I'm not deeply aware of it. And this book kind of falls into that early 90s. I don't want to say schlocky, but
no, you can say it. I mean, let's be honest. Maximum Carnage was this bloated 13-part crossover among all the Spider-Man titles, where you can tell this was written by a marketing department. It was not a very inspired story that was going to change the industry. Hey, let's have Carnage and Venom fight everybody in the Marvel Universe that's hot right now. I mean, you had the Punisher, you had Darkhawk, you had the Avengers in this crossover, and it was basically a 13-issue fight scene. I mean, I couldn't tell you the plot except for Carnage and Venom are running around fighting everybody. There is a key first appearance, if you want to consider this a key, the first appearance of Shriek.
Okay.
Exactly. Shrug.
Yeah. So is that the reason why this is hot? Is that the reason why people are actually...
I think it's a Spider-Man #1. It's got Carnage. It's got Venom. It's the first part of a big multi-issue crossover that, you know, a lot of people honestly may have fond memories of. I'm curious what you guys think. Tell us in the comments and hit us up on Instagram. Tell me if I'm full of crap. I'm open to that. I've heard it before.
No, but it's a good point. I mean, just because a book is selling doesn't mean that it's scarce. So you need to do your research to make sure that book is worth the amount of money that people are charging for it. Remember, people will charge what they feel the market will bear, not necessarily what the value of the book is in general. So this may be one of those books.
Maybe I'm too close to it. I mean, I remember seeing boxes and boxes and boxes of this book. So when I see it selling for $20-30 raw, I just go, wait, that's a $1 box book, people. So I'm an old man. Maybe I just have been out of the crate digging for too long. So I'm more than willing to be corrected. So please school me if you need to.
Hey, remember, there used to be boxes and boxes of Hulk 181s and Amazing Spider-Man 300s, you know.
New Mutants 98. So we'll see. Maybe in a year or so, this will be a really hot book, and I'll have all sorts of egg on my face.
I'll make sure I feed you that crow.
Up next, we've got a great guest. His name is Jamie Newbold. I've known Jamie for 20 years. When I first moved to San Diego in January of 2000, his was the comic shop I had heard about. I was like, I got to go check this out. I'm glad I did. And he has written a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. It's called The Forensic Comicologist: Insights from a Life in Comics. And it's a crazy story about how he had these kind of dual career paths. And I will let Jamie explain more because he's right here. Hi, Jamie. Welcome.
Hey, guys.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
Deja vu.
I know.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're saying deja vu is because I just did this entire great interview with Jamie and I forgot to hit record. So we're going to pull the curtain back and let you guys take two. Jamie, you've been collecting comics since you were a kid. I mean, you started in the mid-'60s, right? What were your favorites?
I had my dad work Monday nights at San Diego City College. He was an administrator. The only night work were Mondays. So he loved comics, and he knew I loved dinosaurs. So DC Comics put out that Star Spangled War story series where the soldiers always fight dinosaurs. So he'd bring me a dinosaur comic book every Monday. He goes home. That was it. I put his love, comics, my love, dinosaurs became one love for me. And I have not stopped reading new comic books since the 60s. So some titles have gone by the wayside and come back. Some have been in place, like the Hulk, through Tales to Astonish, through all the Hulk titles. I have read them nonstop for 55 years. And somewhere along the way, I became a collector, as all of us are, and then a dealer. And I'm still dealing comic books.
And you went to some of the earliest San Diego Comic Cons. I mean, your first year over there was in '72, right?
Yeah, it's the third show. It was the first at the El Cortez, the venerable old hotel with the glass elevator outdoors. There are many of us who should have written a book about that hotel. Now, there are a few of us still around. I introduced some of that in my book, The Forensic Comicologist, if you can see that. I wrote a few stories, but frankly, when your first convention is the El Cortez Hotel, and it's like you've been introduced to heroin and you aren't never coming off, because that was the gig. And I've been addicted to cons and comics and everything since.
How did you go from being a police officer, a cop, and transition to a career in selling funny books?
Well, I was comic books. I was a comic book guy. I was a carpenter for years. And then that's not a job for guys who are getting a little older. So I looked into police work. I got dared into it, but I was still reading comics. I got on the job. I worked many assignments. One of my assignments was a specialized gang narcotics unit for the San Diego Police Department, of which that is my latest book that just came out last week, In the Company of Cops. But I got injured in the line of duty, what so many of us go through. My wife's a former police detective. She's out because she got injured. Some buddies of mine, we were still reading comic books, still collecting comic books, suggested, hey, why don't you help? So I hadn't done actual sales at con for a while. So 93, 94, I was back in the saddle selling comics. I got the hook again, and I never looked back. When my career failed me because of my injuries and I had to retire, comic books were there waiting for me, open arms. And I'm a successful retailer and an author, and comic books have been my saving grace.
And your storefront kind of had a strange origin story, if you want to take the comic metaphor even further. Tell us a little bit about how it actually came about.
We, the three partners originally, there are no partnerships now, but there were three partners. All of us were married, and our wives, and all of us, because of all the inventory that was messing up their clean homes. So we discussed getting a spot. We picked a crap warehouse in an industrial park that no one can find. And we moved our stuff in there. And we figured, hey, we'll just do more conventions. And Jamie working more so he can run this thing. Then we decided, well, why don't we open this place up a couple days a week, like on weekends, so the other partners can hang out. Then why don't we open this up every day and make a really big deal of it?
He agrees.
And then why am I doing conventions? The store is kicking ass. Why am I doing all these conventions? A couple of my assistants, they want me to portray them in this podcast, but I won't. So stop yelling at me. Okay, what's next?
They're helping. I remember the first time I attempted to go to your store, and you're right, it's tucked away a little bit, but if you call, you get good directions. This is pre-map quest, and I found it. So
yeah, damn you found me anyway.
Exactly. So the store is kind of started almost like a hangout or a storage facility, for lack of a better way to describe it, and it became this great worldwide business for you.
Yeah, we went from one warehouse suite, dirty, musty, crappy place, 1,000 square feet, to 4,000 square feet. John, I don't think you know this, but 2 years ago, we opened up a coffee shop in my comic book store.
Oh, wow.
So, I'm not talking a Keurig with pods. I'm talking an absolute a coffee island, full blends, teas, everything, steamed coffee, espresso, the whole thing. That then officiated inclusion in the place you go to talk comics and hang out. Because we had set up a cafe in one of the suites, hollowed out, and put tables and chairs. And a lot of the indie people would come in, and we let anybody come in and showcase their work, talk about it. We had podcasts, and Movies made, films and things have been done there, you know, and because it's a warehouse, we open up that big roll-up door and then we put more chairs right in the driveway and extended it. So we were already pro-COVID before COVID came. We were ready for it. And when the store closed at 5 on a Saturday, we simply sat outside here when everybody else was hustling home.
You know, you've been around for a bit. So what's the craziest collection that you've acquired over the years?
Well, we had a friend of mine. He became a friend of mine about 12 years ago. I'd known him for 10 years before he passed away. And he was getting beaten up on a regular basis by comic book dealers who were just taking advantage because he was wealthy, and they would just upsell him with overpriced junk. He was too polite to critique them, and he kept buying it, and finally he got sick of them. Since he had penthouses in several parts of the country, including one here. He just said, come over sometime. So I went to the penthouse, and there it was, a $200,000 cash purchase on my part, took everything. And that was an amazing feat for us. And my wife, God bless her, listened to me and seen me work miracles selling comics, and she gave her blessing, and we spent that money, and we never looked back. Part of those profits have turned into a restaurant we now own in the mountains outside of San Diego.
Awesome.
But that one's not so much crazy. It's although it did include Detective Comics #2 on to the present, minus the number 27.
Okay.
Action Comics #2 on. Superman 1 on. Green Lantern 1 on. Adventure Comics, as in New Adventure, as in New Comics from 1934, #2 on. Flash Comics #1 on. Wonder Woman #1 on. Batman #1 on.
Yikes!
Yeah, you know, it's different when you hear the money spent, and then you see what I got for it.
Yeah,
you can understand how I was able to turn that into.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. That's
and then there's the crazy ones. This buddy of mine, Richard, I know we had this conversation earlier. I'm going to make it short. Buddy of mine, I went to England to buy a collection. It was all pre-code horror and horror comics from the very early 60s. It was about as expensive as this DC comic book collection. The problem was, you don't go to England with a guy who drinks beer, an Irishman, and not drink beer. 30 pubs later, I think I have cirrhosis of the liver, and I've come to admit that I like warm cask beer, dark, warm beer from a wooden container.
wow.
That these bars pump into a glass. Takes 7 minutes to get a righteous pour, but you get used to it. Just took 30 pubs across most of northern England. I went to Leeds. I went to York. I went to Ossett. I went to a place where England has its largest prison for the mentally insane, but they make good beer there.
Right. Why not?
We figured out how to get all that stuff back home the right way. FedExed it all, learned about customs forms. If you ever go to England and you buy comics and you want to ship them home, don't. Do not do this. Their customs issues are amazingly complex. We were timed so that we had it for the 2019 Comic-Con, and you want to make a big splash when you're a dealer at the level I work at. You really want a big splash before a large convention. The dealers, it's a shark frenzy, and all the fans, they lump in behind them and they attack trying to get that stuff before everybody else, which is what they did to us at Con. We beat these things out, and every dealer inside the room was salivating and lined up and fought each other and lied and tried to steal, tried to work deals, cut out the other guy. It was a righteous blood fest for comics.
Sounds like a reality TV show opportunity.
It's interesting. You were joking, but you said steal. You've actually been like an undercover cop at some of these conventions and stopped thefts from happening, and you talk about it in your book.
My reputation as a retired cop has preceded me, but even when I wasn't retired, people get into trouble all the time. That's why I wrote the book. I could figure out how to get justice when they get ripped off in a comic book deal. I took a police report when I was still on the job at Ocean Beach. A guy, his comic collection was stolen. And I was the one assigned to take the report. Well, what are the odds that I'd be at con months later? And he would be at con too, and he'd go, Jamie, Officer Newbold, I think I found my comic book collection. So I go, okay, Ray, let's go look for it. And there it was. It was at another dealer's table. He feigned ignorance. And he had sold some to another dealer who also feigned ignorance. And I'm not going to get hands-on involved. And security, by the way, at Comic-Con is useless. We have our own security now at con. We hire our own people. That it is a joke. Do not trust the con people. But back then, because I was still a sworn officer, I was able to exert a little pull. I got security to follow me, and they did the job. They shut both dealers down, recovered this man's comic books, and the rest is history. Wow. I've had this happen many times at the store. I'm the gateway to justice. Yeah, the PD has called me and asked for help when they uncover a collection, if I can help them determine if it's stolen or not, that kind of thing.
Your book actually gives a really good tip for dealers, which is obvious when you read it, but I can't tell you how many people probably do this. And that is, don't leave boxes of extra inventory under your skirt, your table skirt.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody does that.
No, we know all the tricks. We've watched them. We've actually set up stings and watched them. We see how they do what they do. When the guy comes up to your booth and bends down to tie his shoe, and you've got that drape across the front of the table, they're reaching up and under, and they're grabbing whatever's there. And these guys all leave their comic books on top of something, as though if they leave them on the floor behind them, it'll be or tainted. So they like to prop them up on boxes where they stay clean, but the boxes are on the table right next to the drapes. This is a constant problem.
You should fill a box with Turok #1s and leave it under the table.
You know, we used to make that joke, Richard, about Spawn once, but I'm not making that joke.
I know, right?
It's out of control. It's
a $1 book.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's funny because earlier on the podcast, we're talking about Spider-Man Unlimited #1 and how people are seeing that this is a hot book. And I'm arguing this is a $1 book, people.
Yeah. 2.5 or 2.3 million copies. I think I quoted some of those 90s keys in my book, how many copies were actually printed. But I'll tell you this much. Jim Lee used to be a customer of mine in 2005, 2006 when Wildstorm was here. When the negotiations with DC and Wildstorm DC was going to absorb Wildstorm, Jim came in the shop one day, pulled me aside and said, I've got 5,000 copies of that 1991 X-Men #1, all 5 covers. Would you be interested in buying these from me? Now, this is when it was a $1 book, right? This was junk. So we never connected, but he approached me about it. So he understood, I just got to get rid of stuff. Now I have a business competitor down the street from me. He's got that thing. That's his main wall book. $20.
It's crazy.
Stacks them in the dollar bins 1/2 mile down the road. He's got them on the wall for $20.
Yeah.
It's a perspective, right? It's like I said, buyer beware, man. You need to know better than what you know.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today twice and being patient with us as we work through our technical issues, which is a fancy way of saying John being a moron and not hitting record the first time.
It was bound to happen.
This one is recording, right?
Yep.
Or am I going to be back on again
in the corner? We can see the recording thing. Yes.
Yeah, this is it. Trust me, I would not ask you to do it a third time. But I will take the opportunity to plug your book once again. It is called The Forensic Comicologist: Insights from a Life in Comics. It's Jamie Newbold. There it is. He's showing it off. You get on Amazon, you get on Kindle. You can stop him at your next show after COVID's over and say, Jamie, where's your book? I want to buy it. He is the greatest. Make sure you visit SoCalComics.com. If you're in San Diego or you're visiting San Diego in the future, stop by his store, Southern California Comics. Anything you want to add, Jamie? Anything I missed?
Come back down to SD and let's buy each other a beer.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm allowed to work remotely for work now, so I'm debating moving back. I'm dead serious. So that's the one positive thing of all.
This is a subtle hint, but there is a brewery in my parking lot, which has become my second office. They even give me corporate discount. So come on down for a beer.
We will. All right. Thanks, Jamie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Pleasure. Anytime.
Well, that was interesting. We got to hear a little bit of crime fighting and book detective work from a former police officer for 20 years on the San Diego police force, and he left it, retired, and became a funny book slinger.
What a great career. I would love that transition.
I love it, and his book is great. Make sure you get it. The name of the book is the Forensic Comicologist, and it's on Amazon, and it's on Kindle, and it's worth a read. It's really entertaining. All right, moving on. Our artist spotlight this week is someone that you and I both came up with, Richard, and that is George Pérez. What's your experience with George Pérez? What do you like about George?
George, to me, and Marv Wolfman on the Teen Titans back in the early 80s, they just set the tone for that book, and it is a well-loved title in my collection.
It was like the DC's version of X-Men. I mean, it's such an obvious thing to point out, but DC was kind of like at that point, and that book really revitalized them and got DC ready for the 80s. But it wasn't his first work. His early Marvel work, he helped launch the Sons of the Tiger in Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, a Marvel black and white title, introduced the White Tiger in those pages, and then he got a regular gig drawing the Fantastic Four, where he drew the Crusader, who was the Marvel boy from the 50s that ended up having the quantum bands explode on him, and then they were found by a certain Wendell Vaughn later, and that guy became...
Who is that guy?
You know, we're talking Quasar here. The best thing I have is, I can't believe I'm going to show this, but years ago at Comic-Con, I was dressed as Quasar, whatever, and I'm walking around, and this guy like yells across the hall, hey, Quasar. And I walk over, and he goes, I drew your first appearance in the 70s. And I'm like, oh, are you George Pérez? He's like, yeah. So here's a picture of me with George Pérez. I look ridiculous, granted.
That's awesome.
From there, he did a run on the Avengers with Jim Shooter, and that is kind of ironic that run was so well received, because Jim Shooter is kind of the reason why he left Marvel. Editorial disagreements, he goes to DC, launches New Teen Titans with Marv Wolfman, becomes just this huge fan favorite. They go on to do Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's happy over at DC. They give him Wonder Woman. He has a years-long run on that title, bringing it out of the doldrums. Yeah, I mean, that is the one and only time I've ever read Wonder Woman. What's cool is he kind of cut his teeth drawing these huge group scenes. Like, it's like most artists don't want to be assigned a team book because it's a lot of work. George Pérez is like, oh, Legion of Superheroes? Sure, let me cram every member that's ever... Here's Matter Eater Lad next to Arm Removal Kid. I mean, so great.
Left Pinky guy. Yeah.
And he had this dream assignment that he was going to draw the Justice League Avengers crossover in the 80s. And for various editorial reasons and politics, that didn't happen the first time, but he finally got to fulfill that goal in the 2000s with JLA versus Avengers. And if you don't have that 4-issue prestige chef kiss miniseries, it's so good. Oh, it's every fanboy's dream. So George Pérez, we love you. So moving on from George Pérez, a character he drew in the Avengers and kind of gave him a very Scandinavian look, a very Scandinavian faith, is Thor. And my underrated book this week has nothing to do with George Pérez, but Thor. And that is the clumsiest transition you'll hear this week.
Wow. Yeah, that's that. You got to work on that segue there.
Thor 229. Now, this book is underrated for a couple of reasons. It's an early Firelord appearance, and it's got Herc in it. So, plus it's a classic cover. I mean, this cover was used on every elementary, middle school comic fan's notebook from Mead in the 70s. They had this artwork. I love this cover. It takes me back to like Erie Elementary in Elyria, Ohio. And it's also, strangely enough, and you can throw a cream pie at me or whatever you want to do when I say this, technically the first appearance of Wolverine. What? Okay. On the letters page, there is a house ad for the Incredible Hulk 181 introducing Wolverine. And it's got a picture of Wolverine. It's got all that. You know, he's in 180, so maybe it's not the first appearance. But this came out before Hulk 181. And for some reason, people have like glommed onto this and made this sort of a semi-key. The last 9.8 sale was back in November of 2019 for $400. And I thought that was a long stretch for this book to have not sold a 9.8. So I went and looked at the census. That's because there's only 6 9.8s of this.
Wow.
This is an extremely low census book. There are tons of 9.6s, but only 6 9.8s. And the reason why is that dark cover. It's got that dark, I don't know, tan, magenta cover. It's going to pick up every kind of imperfection. So if you're out in the wild and you're looking for books, besides Spider-Man Unlimited #1, grab a Thor 229 if you see it, because you may be glad you did. What do you have this week?
I went a little bit more modern. Given sort of the conversation we had in the past about Doctor Doom and his potential entry into the MCU, I took a different tack towards it and went with Shuri, who is the Black Panther's sister. In the movie and the MCU, she is the head scientist. She's the Q of Wakanda, apparently.
That's a good way to describe it. I like that.
But she had a combat role later on in the movie, and she was a pivotal character in the movie, and I think she became a fan favorite. Well, Shuri has even more activity in the actual book. Back in 2005, in Black Panther #2, she was introduced, and later in the 2009 series, she actually becomes Black Panther for a while and dons the costume and is Black Panther for the world. I can see a parallel to that coming in the MCU, where we're going to have more Black Panther movies coming up, and I could see there being some event that happens that may bring her to the front and she becomes the Black Panther, and we have a movie where she is the Black Panther. So I think there's some real possibility for this particular book, her first appearance in Black Panther #2. Again, this is the 2005 series. This is 2009. There's a number of other series that have been out. Right now, the GP on a 9.8 is only $215, but I'm already seeing there's traction in the market. eBay, for example, you can't find a listing for this book for less than $280, and the last sale was for $245. So there's some upward pressure on this book. I think it's a great opportunity to pick up, because that upward pressure means there's interest, and if you catch it at the front of that wave, then you have an opportunity to get in for a better price. While you're looking at books like this, the 2009 run is great. #1 issue has a awesome J. Scott Campbell cover of Shuri on the cover. She's not yet Black Panther, but she's dressed in the Black Panther uniform. She doesn't become Black Panther until issue 5. But it's a great cover. It's a beautiful cover. And there's a sketch variant for that cover that is astronomically expensive. So if you are out hunting and you come across the sketch cover, pick it up, definitely. But if you even come across the regular cover, I think it's a good buy. These kinds of characters that are related to characters that are in the MCU right now, have a potential of really hitting it off in some of the later phases. So it's an opportunity to pick her up right now before she ends up in the MCU or in a trailer, and you have to pay twice as much, 3 times as much as we've seen with null covers here recently.
This character is immensely popular. I would argue this character is more popular than a lot of characters that have got their own books. And why isn't she in Champions? And why isn't Shuri is the epitome of an underrated character?
Yeah, she had her own series for a while, but currently she doesn't. But I agree with you. I think she's one of those approachable characters that has some strong potential, and I'm surprised Marvel hasn't capitalized on it. Of course, we're in the throes of the epidemic here that is slowing down the studios and the moves they make. But I think it's another one of those characters that is not going to go away. So it behooves you to pick up her key titles or copies now, as opposed to trying to ride that wave after it's already crested.
I agree. It would be behoovy of you to pick up a Black Panther #2. So that's about going to do it for us this week. We want to thank our special guest, Jamie Newbold from Southern California Comics. Visit them online at SoCalComics.com. Pick up a copy of his book, The Forensic Comicologist. It's awesome. It's a great read. Highly recommended. And we will see you next week.
Stay safe.